The air inside the marble lobby felt cold and unwelcoming, as though the tall glass walls had been built to keep people out rather than invite them in, and the receptionist behind the polished white desk barely lifted her eyes from her screen when the man stepped inside his dark tailored suit, absorbing the morning light like it had been woven with purpose and power. Yet there was no name tag, no entourage, no fanfare. He simply walked with the steady calm of someone who knew he belonged everywhere. He set foot. The receptionist finally looked up, her expression shifting in an instant from polite mask to one of thinly veiled disdain. She tapped her pen against the counter impatiently and asked in a clipped voice, "Do you have an appointment, sir?" Her words were sharp like the edge of glass, and though she smiled, it was a smile that carried no warmth, only judgment. He nodded slowly, his deep voice calm, measured. "Yes, I do. I am here to meet with your executive team." But before he could even finish, she cut him off with a raised brow and a cold laugh. "I think you might be lost, sir. This building is not open for walk-ins." She tilted her head, scanning him up and down, as though his very presence offended her, and with each passing second her smirk grew wider. Other employees in the lobby pretended not to notice, but their eyes flicked between the man and the receptionist, whispers beginning to curl through the air like smoke. Her words growing sharper. "You people are always trying to sneak in here, hoping for a chance, hoping someone will see you, but this is not that kind of place." The man stood still, his expression calm, almost unreadable, his gaze locked onto hers, not with anger, but with a weight that made her shift uncomfortably, though she tried to mask it with another laugh. He slowly reached into his pocket, pulling out a sleek black envelope with a golden seal embossed on its cover, and placed it gently on the counter. Before her, her fingers froze above the keyboard, her smirk faltering just slightly before she scoffed again, shaking her head. "I do not know what game you are playing, but no amount of cheap tricks or forged invitations will get you through those doors." She flicked the envelope back across the counter dismissively. Like it was nothing, the sound of the envelope sliding echoed far louder than it should have in that hushed lobby. The man's hand caught it calmly, his eyes still fixed on hers, and for a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then he said in a quiet voice so controlled it felt like steel wrapped in silk, "Thank you for making this very clear." With that he turned away, his shoes clicking softly against the marble floor, every step deliberate, every movement steady. The receptionist exhaled sharply, like she had just won a private battle, leaning back in her chair with a triumphant grin, but deep inside, some part of her stomach churned in unease. She could not explain a chill that refused to leave her skin. Moments later, two suited men from upstairs rushed into the lobby, their faces pale, their eyes searching until they landed on the man's retreating back. One of them called out loudly, "Sir, please wait." The entire lobby froze, heads turning, whispers surging louder now as people began to realize the man was not who they thought. The receptionist blinked, confusion breaking through her smug facade. "She is talking to him," she whispered, but before she could fully process it, the two men hurried past her, ignoring her entirely, and caught up with the man, their voices urgent. "We are so sorry, sir. We did not know you had arrived earlier than expected. The board has been waiting for you upstairs. Please forgive the delay." The receptionist's smile collapsed, her throat tightening as the weight of her mistake crashed down upon her like a tidal wave. She turned toward the man again, her voice suddenly soft, almost panicked. "Sir, I did not realize. I apologize, I thought." But her words trailed off because he did not even look at her, his eyes fixed instead on the grand glass elevators ahead, his posture tall, his aura radiating the kind of authority that no uniform or nameplate could ever disguise. The lobby had gone silent, all eyes on him, the whispers now unmistakable. "That is the new CEO, the one they brought in after the merger, the man who bought out the rival company with cash to spare, the one who was said to have turned bankrupt businesses into empires." His reputation had traveled faster than his name, yet somehow the receptionist had missed it. Blinded by her own arrogance, he paused at the elevator doors, finally turning his head slightly to glance back at her, his voice soft enough that only she could hear, yet sharp enough to cut through her heart. "Do not worry, you will remember me soon enough." The doors slid open, swallowing him into the mirrored interior, and the moment they closed, the tension in the lobby snapped like a taut string, breaking. The receptionist's hands trembled against the desk, her breath shallow, her coworkers staring at her with wide eyes, some pitying, some almost amused, but none daring to speak. Upstairs in the towering boardroom, glass walls overlooking the entire city, the man sat at the head of the table, his presence commanding without effort. The executives leaned forward, hanging on his every word as he outlined the morning agenda, his tone steady, his strategy ruthless, and though his focus was entirely on the empire he was shaping, a flicker of memory lingered in his mind. The receptionist's mocking smiled the way she dismissed him without hesitation, and he knew, in that moment, her world would soon collapse like fragile glass beneath the weight of truth. Back in the lobby, the receptionist could not shake the cold that crawled through her veins. She tried to focus on her work, typing emails, answering calls, but her mind replayed the look in his eyes, the calm, the control, the quiet promise hidden in his words. By noon her phone rang, a sharp tone that made her jump, the caller ID flashing with the HR director's name. She answered quickly, her voice shaky. "Hello, yes. This is she. There was a pause on the other end, a pause that stretched like a shadow before the words came. You are needed upstairs. Immediately her heart dropped the desk around. Her blurred as she stood, her legs heavy, her hands clammy. She walked toward the elevators, each step echoing in her chest, like a drumbeat of dread. The same elevators that had carried the man only hours ago, now waiting to carry her toward something. She could not yet name. The doors closed behind her. The ride upwards, painfully slow, and with each floor that passed her chest, tightened more. What was waiting for her at the top, she could not know, but deep down she already feared the truth. When the doors opened, the HR director stood waiting, stern expression, no hint of kindness in her eyes. This way, she said curtly, leading her down the long hallway toward a conference room, and as the receptionist entered, her breath caught in her throat because, at the head of the table sat the man, the black CEO, his gaze calm, steady, piercing, directly through her like she was nothing more than glass, about to shatter the silence. Stretched unbearable until he finally spoke, his voice deep, controlled. You remember me? And in that moment she knew her life would never be the same again. The room felt suffocating as the receptionist stood frozen just inside the doorway. Her body stiff, her eyes darting nervously across the faces around the table. The executives stared with a mixture of confusion and judgment, some hiding their disapproval behind carefully neutral expressions, while others simply let the disdain show in their narrowed eyes and pursed lips. She wanted to shrink into herself, but her legs refused to move. At the head of the table, the black CEO leaned back in his chair, calm, powerful, his expression unreadable, but his silence carried more weight than 100 accusations. His gaze locked on her with the same steady intensity that had left her trembling in the lobby earlier that morning, and for the first time in years, she felt stripped of all the little shields she had built. Arrogance, confidence, pride, all of it melted away beneath the fire in his eyes. The HR director cleared her throat, breaking the silence. She explained in a tight, clipped tone that the CEO had specifically requested the receptionist be brought upstairs after the incident in the lobby. Her words were sharp, each syllable a quiet condemnation. She then stepped aside, leaving the receptionist alone at the center of the room, exposed like prey, surrounded by predators. The CEO finally spoke, his voice deep, resonant, carrying across the polished table with absolute authority. You treated me like I was beneath you, he said slowly, carefully, each word deliberate. You judged me before you knew my name. You dismissed me before you even gave me a chance to speak. The receptionist swallowed hard, her lips parting, but no words came out, her throat too dry, her mind too clouded by panic. He stood, his tall frame towering over her as he walked around the table, his footsteps echoing in the quiet room. With every step he seemed to grow larger, stronger, while she felt smaller, weaker, until he stood directly in front of her, his eyes boring into hers. What gave you the right to decide who belongs in this building? He asked, his tone soft yet cutting like a blade wrapped in velvet. Her hands shook against her sides, her voice breaking when she tried to answer. I did not know who you were. I thought you were. She stopped the moment the words slipped out, realizing too late the trap in her excuse. His brow lifted sharply, his voice low, dangerous. You thought I was what? Her silence was her answer. The room held its breath, waiting, the tension so thick it wrapped around every throat. In that space she wanted to run, she wanted to disappear, but the CEO leaned closer, his voice a whisper only she could hear, dripping with quiet promise. Your judgment cost you more than you can imagine. He turned away suddenly, striding back to his chair and addressing the room with sharp precision. This is the type of culture we will no longer tolerate, he declared. Discrimination, arrogance, lack of respect, it poisons companies from the inside. He looked directly at the executives, his voice rising slightly. From this day forward, our company will reflect values of respect and dignity for all. If that is not something you can stand for, then you should leave now. The executives shifted in their seats, some nodding in firm agreement, others glancing uneasily at one another, but none dared challenge him. The HR director gave a subtle nod, her pen scratching across her notepad as she marked every word. The CEO leaned back again, his eyes flicking once more to the receptionist, and with a single wave of his hand he dismissed her. Leave, he said flatly. Her legs moved on instinct, carrying her quickly out of the room, but as she walked down the long hallway back toward the elevator, her chest tightened with dread. She knew it was not over. She knew somehow he would not let this end so easily, and she was right. By the time she returned to her desk, whispers filled the lobby. Her coworkers stared openly now, no longer hiding their curiosity. Some eyes gleamed with pity, while others carried cruel satisfaction, waiting to see what would happen next. She tried to focus on her screen, her fingers clumsy against the keyboard, but the words blurred. She could not read, she could not think. Her phone rang again, this time the HR office telling her to come immediately. She rose slowly, legs heavy, as though she were walking toward an execution chamber, her mind spinning with fear. She imagined every possible outcome, a warning, a suspension, maybe even termination, but nothing could prepare her for the truth. Waiting in that office, an HR director sat stiffly behind her desk, papers neatly stacked, her expression graved. She gestured for the receptionist to sit without a word. Then folded her hands and began. "We have reviewed this morning's incident," she said coolly. "The CEO has made his position very clear. Our company cannot tolerate behavior that undermines our core values." She paused, watching the receptionist squirm in her chair before continuing, "Effective immediately your employment here is terminated." The words crashed into her like a violent wave. Her breath caught, her vision blurred. She stammered, trying desperately to plead, "I did not mean it. I did not know who he was, please. I need this job." But the HR director's eyes were cold, unflinching. "The decision is final," she said quietly. "You may collect your things, and security will escort you out." Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet. She stood on shaky legs, walking back to her desk, where her coworkers' stares pierced her like knives. Some whispered, others openly smirked. She ignored them, shoving her few belongings into a cardboard box, her hands trembling uncontrollably. The walk to the exit felt endless, her chest tight, her throat aching. With every step she heard the echo of his voice. In her head, "You will remember me soon enough." And she knew he had meant every word. Outside the building, the sunlight felt harsh, unforgiving, the city buzzing around her like it had no idea her world had just collapsed. She sank onto the steps, clutching the box to her chest, her tears finally spilling freely, her heart heavy with shame and anger. How had her life unraveled so quickly? She thought back to the arrogance she had carried that morning, the cruel words she had tossed at him without thought. Now they returned to her, like knives, twisting deeper with every memory. But beneath the grief, a spark of something darker stirred in her chest: anger, resentment, rage. How dare he humiliate her like this? How dare he destroy her life for one mistake? She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms as she whispered to herself, "I will not let him take everything from me. I will make him pay." The day stretched into night. She sat in her small apartment staring at the box of her belongings, her phone buzzing with messages from friends and coworkers, but she ignored them, her mind consumed with images of his calm, powerful face, his eyes, unshaken by her pleas. Her rage grew with every passing minute, until it was no longer grief, but fuel. She opened her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard, searching his name, digging into every article, every interview, every piece of information she could find about him. The media painted him as brilliant, ruthless, unstoppable. He had built an empire from nothing, turning broken companies into gold, commanding respect in every room he entered. Yet she looked deeper, her eyes narrowing as she uncovered whispers of enemies, lawsuits, rivals who had fallen before him. A bitter smile crept across her lips. If he thought he could destroy her so easily, he was wrong. She would find his weakness, she would uncover his secrets, she would bring him down, no matter the cost. But what she did not know was that he had already anticipated this. While she sat in her apartment, plotting, he sat in his penthouse office overlooking the city, a glass of dark liquor in his hand, his mind calm, his expression unreadable. His assistant, entering quietly to inform him of her termination, he nodded slowly, then asked a single question: "Has she broken yet?" The assistant hesitated before answering. "Not yet, sir, but she will soon." The CEO's gaze turned toward the glittering skyline, his voice low, steady. "She thinks this is about her job. She thinks this is punishment for an insult, but it is more than that. She represents everything that must be torn down: arrogance, ignorance, cruelty. And when she falls, the whole company will see what happens when you build your empire on disrespect." He raised the glass to his lips, his eyes narrowing as though he could see her through the walls of the city itself. And in that moment, two battles were set in motion: her desperate hunger for revenge and his quiet, calculated plan for absolute dominance. The game had only just begun, and neither of them knew how far it would go before one of them was destroyed. Night stretched endlessly as the receptionist sat hunched over her laptop, the glow of the screen washing her face in pale blue shadows, her eyes bloodshot from hours of digging through articles and forums and press releases, every word about the black CEO filling her with equal parts awe and hatred. She scrawled past glowing headlines about his victories, ruthless acquisitions, and brilliant strategies, each one a reminder of how far beneath him she had been cast. Her fingers trembled as she clicked deeper into obscure corners of the web where whispers grew darker: lawsuits, settlements, rumors of betrayals, hushed scandals, rivals who had mysteriously disappeared from the business world. She leaned closer, her heart pounding faster with every thread she read. There had to be something she could use to shatter the perfect image she had built. But as she read, one thing became clear: the man, it was untouchable. Every lawsuit settled, every scandal buried, every rival eliminated with precision. It was as though he thrived on enemies, as though their downfall only fueled his empire. Her frustration boiled over, her fists slamming against the table, tears of rage spilling down her cheeks. She screamed into the empty apartment, "He ruined me, and now he will pay." Deep inside, beneath the fury, there was fear that she was nothing more than an insect buzzing around a giant who could crush her without effort. She shook her head, forcing the thought away, telling herself she still had power, she still had a chance to fight. Meanwhile, high above the city in his penthouse office, the CEO sat calmly, reviewing reports, his mind sharp and steady. His assistant stood silently by, waiting for instructions. The CEO's voice cut through the silence. "She will come after me," he said, his tone calm, certain she will not disappear quietly. "She is too proud." The assistant frowned. "Should we take action against her now?" "Sir," the CEO shook his head. "No. Let her move first. When people reveal their true nature, they destroy themselves. All we must do is watch." The receptionist, however, was not thinking of caution. Her anger burned too hot. She decided she would confront him directly, expose him publicly. She imagined herself standing in front of cameras, shouting about how he had destroyed her life, how he was nothing but a tyrant. She pictured the sympathy pouring in the headlines turning against him, but as she fantasized, her phone buzzed, startling Hera. Message flashed across the screen from an unknown number. "Stop digging before it is too late." Her blood froze, her hands shaking as she read it again, her eyes darting around the room, as though someone could see her. The walls felt closer, the air heavier. She quickly typed back, "Who is this?" But no reply came. Her chest tightened, panic clawing at her throat. Had he already found out what she was doing? Was he watching her now? Slammed the laptop shut, pacing the apartment, her thoughts racing. She knew she should stop, but the fire of humiliation burned stronger than fear. She opened the laptop again, determined to push further, this time focusing not on him but on the company itself. Financial records, partnerships, supply chains. She combed through every trace she could find, until finally something caught her eye. A small subsidiary buried under layers of paperwork, one that seemed to drain money without clear explanation. Her heart raced. Could this be it? A hidden weakness, a secret he was keeping from the world? I copied the files frantically, saving everything onto a flash drive, her hands shaking with adrenaline. If she could prove he was laundering money or hiding losses, she could take him down. She could have her revenge bet. What she did not realize was that her every keystroke had already been anticipated in his office. The CEO's screens flickered with live updates, streams of data tracing her activity. His lips curved into the faintest smile as he watched her fall directly into the web he had set by. Morning, she was exhausted but fueled by a manic energy. She dressed carefully, applying makeup with trembling hands, determined to face him again. She clutched the flash drive in her pocket like a weapon, walking through the same glass doors that had once been her domain. The security guards glanced at her uneasily, but let her pass. Unsure of the new rules under the CEO's reign, she marched straight to the elevators, her heart pounding each floor, carrying her closer to him. When the doors opened to the executive floor, she strode forward boldly, demanding to see him. The assistant raised an eyebrow, but after a brief moment of hesitation, gestured her inside. She entered the vast office, the skyline sprawling behind him like a throne of steel and light. He looked up from his desk, calm, collected, his gaze cutting through her. She slammed the flash drive onto his desk, her voice trembling with fury. "I know your secret," she hissed. "You can fire me, you can humiliate me, but I will not let you get away with this." He regarded her for a long, silent moment before leaning back in his chair, his hands folding calmly, and then he asked softly, "What secret would that be?" She faltered, her confidence wavering, but she forced herself forward. "I found your hidden company draining money. I know what you are doing, and if I go to the press with this, you will be finished." He chuckled low and steady, the sound sending chills through her veins. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk, his eyes never leaving hers, and he said, "You really think you were the first to find this?" Her breath caught, her anger clashing with confusion. "What do you mean?" she whispered. He rose from his chair, circling around her, slowly like a predator, studying prey that had wandered too close to its own trap. He spoke with calm certainty. "That the company is mine, yes, and its purpose is hidden, yes, but it is no secret, it is leverage." He leaned closer, his voice sharp. "I left it visible because I wanted someone like you to find it." Her chest tightened as realization crept in. Her discovery was not a weapon, it was bait. Her legs weakened, but she forced herself to stand tall. "You are lying," she spat. "You are bluffing." He shook his head. Slowly, "No, I am teaching you," he said firmly. "You let arrogance blind you in the lobby, and now arrogance blinds you again. You think you hold power over me, but all you have done is prove to the world that you cannot be trusted with anything." Her face burned with rage, tears stinging her eyes. She wanted to scream, wanted to claw at him, but his calm stare left her paralyzed. He finally turned back toward his desk, dismissing her with a flick of his hand. "Security will escort you out again," he said flatly, "and this time they will make sure you do not return." Two guards appeared at the door, their grip firm, as they guided her struggling form out of the office, down the hall, into the waiting elevator, her screams echoing down the corridor. "I will ruin you, I swear, I will ruin you." CEO returned to his chair, gazing out at the city below, his voice calm, as he spoke to no one in particular. "She will try again, but every step she takes only tightens the noose she ties around herself." Later that evening, the receptionist sat alone in a crowded bar, her box of belongings beside her, ignored by the passing crowd. She drank heavily, her anger boiling, until a stranger slid into the seat. Across from her, a man in a gray suit with sharp eyes and a faint smile. He leaned forward and whispered, "I know what he did to you, and I know how to destroy him." Her breath hitched, her anger flaring again. "Who are you?" she demanded. The man smiled wider. "Just someone who has been waiting for the right." Allah, her pulse quickened, the rage inside her merging with a dangerous hope. "Maybe She was not alone, maybe she could still fight back. She reached across the table, gripping his hand tightly as she whispered then. Show me how. The bar felt like a haze of smoke and shadows as the receptionist leaned closer to the stranger. Her eyes red from drink and tears, her heart pounding. With desperate hope, his voice low calm, promising the very thing she craved, revenge, he spoke with certainty as though he knew every wound in her chest. Every sleepless night, every humiliating whisper that had followed her since the moment she was cast out. I have watched him for years, the man said, his tone quiet, yet fierce. I know the way he moves, the way he builds his empire, brick by brick, while crushing anyone who stands in his path. He has ruined more lives than yours, but people are too afraid to fight back, too afraid to face him alone. His eyes locked onto hers, sharp and unyielding. But you are not alone anymore if you want to strike him down. I will help you. Her fingers tightened around the glass in her hand, her chest rising and falling rapidly with each breath. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe someone finally saw her not as a failure, not as the woman who had lost everything, but as someone capable of striking back against the man who had taken it all from her. Still suspicion flickered in her eyes. Why me? She asked. Why would you help me? A stranger, the man leaned back, a faint smile playing across his lips. Because I see something in you, he replied. Fire, desperation, the kind of rage that cannot be tamed. And I know that with the right push, you can become the one thing he never expects. A real threat. His voice dropped lower, his eyes narrowing. I have my reasons, but you do not need to know them now. What you need to decide is simple. Do you want to keep drowning in your grief, or do you want to rise and make him pay? Her chest burned with a mixture of anger and hope. She slammed the empty glass down on the table, her voice trembling with determination. I want him destroyed. The man's smile widened. Good, then we begin tonight. He led her through the dark streets into the back of a waiting car, the city lights flashing past as they drove in silence, finally arriving at a dimly lit office. Tucked away in an industrial district inside, the air smelled of dust and secrecy. Papers and files spread across the desk, photographs pinned to boards showing the CEO shaking hands with politicians, signing contracts with rivals, attending galas surrounded by power and wealth. The receptionist stared at the images, her anger igniting like fire in her veins. The man moved beside her, placing a folder in her hands. Inside were documents, names, numbers, accounts, all tied to the CEO's empire. This is where we hit him, the man said, pointing to a page, a hidden deal with government officials, contracts funneled through shell companies. Money shifting hands under the table. It is not illegal on paper, but if the right people saw it, if the media caught hold of it, his reputation would burn. Her hands shook as she held the folder, her eyes darting across the lines. This is real, she whispered. This is enough to ruin him. The man nodded slowly, but his eyes held a shadow of something she could not read. If you are willing to risk everything, then yes, it is enough. She felt a surge of power for the first time since her downfall, like the ground beneath her feet was no longer crumbling, but rising. She looked at the stranger, her voice steady. I will do it. Tell me what. 2 days passed in a blur of planning and whispers. She followed the man's guidance, digging deeper, gathering evidence, piecing together a puzzle of corruption that could topple an empire. But as she worked, the weight of fear never left her shoulders. Every night she glanced out her window, certain someone was watching her. Every ring of her phone made her heart leap with dread, yet the fire inside her kept pushing her forward. And while the CEO remained calm in his office overlooking the city, his assistant briefing him on minor shifts in the market, on upcoming deals, on competitors making their moves, but the CEO's focus was elsewhere. His lips curved in a faint smile as he asked, has she taken the bait? The assistant hesitated before answering, yes sir, she is connected with someone, though we cannot confirm who. The CEO's eyes gleamed with satisfaction, let her believe she is winning. Every move she makes brings her closer to the end. Back in her small apartment, the receptionist spread the stolen documents across the table, her hands trembling as she arranged them, piece by piece. She whispered to herself, this is it, this is how I make him fall. She imagined the look on his face when the media tore him apart, when his empire collapsed. She clung to that vision. Like a lifeline, the stranger returned, often guiding her, teaching her how to release the information slowly, how to leak it, just enough to spark suspicion, but not enough to trace back to her. He spoke with calm confidence, filling her with courage. Yet sometimes when he thought she was not looking, his eyes darkened with something colder, something calculating. She ignored it, telling herself he was her only ally. One evening, as rain lashed against her window, she sat staring at the documents, her chest tight with doubt. What if this backfired? What if he came for her again? What if she lost more than she already had? The stranger noticed her hesitation and leaned forward, his voice firm. Do not falter. Now you wanted revenge, and this is the only path. If you turn back, you will be nothing but a broken woman, forgotten by everyone. But if you push forward, you will be the one who finally stopped him. Her fists clenched, determination surging once more. You are right, she whispered. I will not stop, not until he loses everything. The next morning, the first leak hit a small but respected news outlet. The headline questioning a mysterious contract linked to the CEO's empire. The story was vague, cautious, but enough to raise eyebrows. Enough to send whispers through the financial world. By noon, the company's stock had dipped by a fraction, not much, but noticeable, and by evening, the whispers had grown louder. The receptionist watched the news with wide eyes, a smile tugging at her lips. For the first time in weeks, she felt victorious, but her triumph was short-lived. Within hours, the CEO held a press conference, standing tall before cameras, his voice calm, commanding, as he dismissed the accusations as baseless speculation. He presented documents proving transparency, counter-evidence that crushed the rumors with ruthless precision. By the end of the broadcast, the stock had not only recovered but climbed higher than before. The receptionist's smile crumbled her chest, tightening with despair. He had turned the attack into a weapon, strengthening himself even more. She turned on the stranger, her voice breaking. "You said this would ruin him. You promised." He shrugged, calmly, his eyes unreadable. "This was only the first strike. You cannot expect an empire to fall overnight. Patience is key." But she saw something flicker in his gaze, a satisfaction that chilled her that night. She could not sleep, her mind spinning with doubt. Was she being used? Was this stranger truly her ally, or just another player in the CEO's game? The thought gnawed at her, but her anger still outweighed her fear. She told herself, even if the stranger had his own motives, as long as he helped her destroy the CEO, it did not matter. What she did not know was that the stranger was no rival of the CEO at all, but his creation, a piece of the trap carefully placed, a false ally designed to draw her deeper into a web she could never escape. And as she lay awake, whispering to herself that she would not stop until he was destroyed, the CEO sat in his office, his eyes fixed on the city. Below, his voice calm as he spoke into the phone, "Everything is unfolding as expected." The morning sun broke across the city skyline, casting golden light against steel towers, but in her apartment, the receptionist felt no warmth. Her hands trembled as she clutched her phone, watching the latest news update, the headline flashing with bold letters: "Accusations dismissed, CEO clears name." Once again, her stomach twisted, her throat burning with shame. Every strike she made seemed to strengthen him rather than weaken him. She slammed the phone down, pacing the room, anger searing through her chest. How is he always ahead of me? How does he know every move? Before I make it, she whispered to herself, her mind racing with paranoia. She thought of the stranger, the man who had promised her victory, the man who had given her the files, the guidance, the courage. Was he lying to her? Was he leading her straight into traps? She shook her head, trying to banish the thought, but the seed of doubt had been planted. That evening, the stranger arrived once again. His suit crisp, his smile faint but unreadable. He laid new documents on her table, telling her calmly, "We are close, closer than ever. You cannot lose faith." Now she stared at him, suspicion burning in her eyes. "Why should I trust you?" she asked. "How do I know you are not just another one of his pawns?" The man chuckled softly, shaking his head. "If I were his pawn, you would already be gone. You are still here because I believe you can finish this fight." Her fists clenched, her heart torn between doubt and desperation. She wanted to believe him because, without him, she had nothing, no plan, no evidence, no path forward. But the voice inside her whispered again, "What if he is the reason you keep failing? What if he is leading you to ruin?" Meanwhile, in the CEO's office, silence ruled as he stood before the vast windows overlooking the city. His assistant at his side, reports stacked neatly on the desk. "She is unraveling, sir," the assistant said. "Her actions grow more reckless each day." The CEO nodded slowly, his expression calm, controlled as always. "Good, let her burn herself out. The more she reaches, the more tangled she becomes." His voice dropped lower. "And then we will end it." Days passed with rising tension, whispers swirling across the financial world, leaks appearing here and there, each one swiftly countered by the CEO, each one leaving the receptionist more desperate, more unhinged, her eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights, her hands trembling constantly. She told herself she was close, she told herself the next strike would work, but deep down, dread coiled in her stomach like a living thing. One night, she met the stranger again, this time in a deserted parking garage, the echo of their footsteps bouncing off cold concrete. He handed her another folder, his eyes sharp as he said, "This is it, the key to everything. This will be the one that finally breaks him." She opened the folder, her breath catching. The papers inside claimed to show illegal transfers, offshore accounts, bribery payments that could not be explained. Her heart raced, her hands shaking. "This is it," she whispered. "This will end him." But as she looked up, she caught something in the stranger's eyes, a flicker of satisfaction, too sharp to cruel. Her heart skipped uneasily, but she pushed the feeling down. She wanted revenge more than she wanted truth. She clutched the folder to her chest, whispering, thank you for helping me." The stranger's smile widened, cold and dangerous. "You will have your revenge." Soon the next morning, she marched into a journalist's office, the folder in her hand, her eyes wild with determination. She laid the papers on the desk, insisting, "This will expose him. This will bring him down." The journalist flipped through the documents, his brow furrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Where did you get these?" he asked. She stammered, "From a source, a reliable source." The journalist looked up sharply, his tone wary. "Do you realize what these are? These are not evidence, they are bait. If I print this and it turns out false, it will not be him destroyed, it will be you." Her blood froze, the room spinning around her. What do you mean bait? She whispered. The journalist leaned back, sighing heavily. These files are too clean, too perfect. It is as if they were designed to be found. He tapped the papers sharply with his finger. If I publish this, and he proves they are fake, your credibility will be gone. No one will ever believe you. Again her chest tightened, her breath, shallow realization dawning like a knife to the gut. The stranger, the man who had fed her every lead, had been working for the CEO all along. Her knees weakened, she stumbled back out of the office, clutching the folder to her chest, her mind spinning in chaos. That night, she confronted the stranger, her voice trembling with fury. You set me up, she hissed. You gave me lies. You wanted me destroyed. His expression did not change. His voice calm, almost mocking. Did you really think you could fight him? Did you really think someone like you could bring down a man like him? You were never meant to win, you were meant to expose yourself. Her stomach dropped, her knees buckling, but she forced herself to stand tall, her voice breaking with rage. Why would you do this to me? He stepped closer, his eyes cold. Because he wanted you to learn the cost of arrogance, because you were nothing but a lesson for others to see, and because you made the mistake of insulting the wrong man. Her chest burned, her fists clenched, tears streaming down her face. I will not stop, she screamed. I will never stop until he pays. The stranger smirked, shaking his head. You already lost the moment you crossed him elsewhere. The CEO sat in his office, watching the city lights flicker below, his assistant entering. Quietly, sir, she is close to breaking. Shall we finish it now? The CEO's lips curved into a faint smile. Not yet. Let her take one final step. Let her believe she still has a chance. Then we will close the trap. In her apartment, the receptionist tore through her papers, shredding everything she had gathered, her screams echoing against the walls, her heart shattered by betrayal, yet her rage still alive. She whispered to herself over and over, I will not stop, I will not stop, even if I burn, I will not stop. But what she did not know was that the end was already near. The trap already sealed, the stranger already preparing the final move that would leave her not just broken, but erased. And as midnight fell across the city, the CEO raised his glass, staring out over the glittering skyline, his voice low, steady, like a vow. She thought she could fight me, she thought she could win, but tomorrow she will learn what it truly means to lose everything. The city was alive with noise and light, but inside her small apartment, the receptionist sat in silence, her body trembling, her face pale, her mind fractured from betrayal. She had been cast out, humiliated, used and abandoned, yet the fire inside her refused to die. Her eyes, red and swollen from tears, still burned with the same desperate rage. She whispered to herself again and again, I will not let him win, I will not vanish like this. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence, a message flashing across the screen from an unknown number. This time not a warning, but an invitation. Rooftop, midnight, come alone. Her chest tightened, her heart pounding. She knew it could be another trap, yet something inside her pushed her forward. Perhaps it was pride, perhaps it was madness, but she could not resist. She needed answers. She needed one last chance to face him. The clock struck midnight as she stepped onto the rooftop, wind whipping through her hair, the city lights sprawling endlessly around her, and there he was, the black CEO, standing tall at the edge of the roof, his silhouette sharp against the night sky, his presence commanding even in the shadows. Her chest heaved, her fists clenched. She stepped closer, her voice shaking with fury. Why did you do this to me? Why destroy me when I only made a mistake? He turned his gaze toward her, calm, steady, his eyes glinting with quiet power, his voice deep, resonant. You still do not understand, do you? He stepped forward, each word measured, deliberate. This was never about your mistake. This was about who you are. You judged me without knowing me. You dismissed me because of the way I looked, the way I walked, the way you assumed I did not belong in your world. That arrogance, that cruelty is what destroys companies. It is what poisons people. It is what I will never allow in my empire. Her knees weakened, tears spilling down her face. She shook her head. I was wrong, I know. I was wrong, but you took everything from me. You ruined me. Why not just forgive me? Why not let me move on? His expression hardened. Forgiveness is for those who learn respect, not for those who cling to pride. Even now, you blame me for your fall, when it was your own arrogance that pushed you from the ledge. She collapsed to her knees, the weight of his words crushing her chest. She sobbed bitterly, her voice breaking. I only wanted to survive. I only wanted to matter. He stared down at her, silent for a long moment before finally speaking softly. Survival built on cruelty is nothing more than decay. You mattered the moment you chose humility, the moment you treated people with dignity, but you never chose that path, and now this is where it has led you. Her sobs echoed across the rooftop, her body shaking, her hands clawing at the cold concrete. She wanted to scream, to fight, to strike him down, but the strength was gone, her fury hollow. Her pride shattered. The truth, undeniable, she had lost, not because he destroyed her, but because she had destroyed herself. The CEO turned away, his voice steady, final. You asked why I ruined you, but the truth is, you ruined yourself. I only made sure the world saw it. He began walking toward the stairwell, his tall frame disappearing into the shadows, leaving her kneeling alone, the night pressing down heavy around her. Hours later, as dawn broke, she still sat on the rooftop, her eyes empty, Her body numb, she stared at the rising sun, feeling smaller than she had ever felt. Her mind replaying every word, every choice, every moment that had brought her here. She realized at last the truth she had spent so long running from. She had not been a victim. She had been her own executioner. Meanwhile, in his office, the CEO poured himself a glass of water, setting it gently on the desk. His assistant asked quietly, "Is it finished now, sir?" The CEO nodded slowly. "Yes, she will not rise again. She has learned what she needed to learn." The assistant hesitated. "Sir, do you ever regret being so ruthless?" The CEO looked out the window, his voice calm, unyielding. "Regret is for those who lose. I do not regret. I build, and in order to build, you must sometimes tear down what is rotten." The days that followed passed in a blur for the receptionist. She wandered the streets, aimless, hollow people, passing her without a glance, whispers of her name fading, until she was forgotten entirely. She had no job, no allies, no voice left, her life reduced to shadows. Yet in her silence she began to see the truth clearer than ever before. She had spent her life judging others, sneering, dismissing, assuming she was better than those she looked down on, and in the end, that arrogance had been her undoing. One evening, she sat on a park bench watching children play, their laughter echoing through the air, and for the first time in weeks her lips curved into a faint, broken smile. She whispered softly to herself, "I lost everything, but maybe losing everything is the only way to see who I really was." Tears rolled down her cheeks, but this time, they were not only of grief, but of acceptance. The CEO never thought of her again. She became just another lesson carved into the foundation of his empire, a reminder to everyone who watched: respect was not negotiable, dignity was not optional. Those who carried cruelty would fall. Those who carried humility would rise. His legend grew, his power expanded, and the world remembered his victories, not the names of those who had tried to destroy him. But somewhere, in the quiet of her heart, the receptionist carried her own legend. Not of victory, not of revenge, but of awakening. She had learned the hardest truth a person can learn: that arrogance can build walls so high they eventually collapse on you, that pride can blind you until you walk willingly into your own ruin, and that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself. The end.